The European Union is a politico-economic union of 28 member states that are located primarily in Europe. It covers an area of 4,324,782 square kilometers, with an estimated population of over 508 million. The EU operates through a system of supranational institutions and intergovernmental negotiated decisions by the member states. The institutions are the European Parliament, the European Council, the Council of the European Union, the European Commission, the Court of Justice of the European Union, the European Central Bank, and the Court of Auditors. The European Parliament is elected every 5 years by EU citizens. The EU has developed a single market through a standardized system of laws that apply in all member states. Within the Schengen area, passport controls have been abolished. EU policies aim to ensure the free movement of people, goods, services, and capital, enact legislation in justice and home affairs, and maintain common policies on trade, agriculture, fisheries, and regional development. The monetary union was established in 1999 and came into full force in 2002. It is currently composed of 19 member states that use the euro as their legal tender. The EU traces its origins from the European Coal and Steel Community and the European Economic Community, formed by the inner 6 countries in 1951 and 1958, respectively. In the intervening years, the community and its successors have grown in size by the accession of new member states and in power by the addition of policy areas to its remit. The Maastricht Treaty established the European Union under its current name in 1993 and introduced European citizenship, the latest major amendment to the constitutional basis of the EU. The Treaty of Lisbon came into force in 2009. Covering 7.3% of the world population, the EU in 2014 generated a nominal gross domestic product of $18.495 trillion, constituting approximately 24% of global nominal GDP and 17% when measured in terms of purchasing power parity. Additionally, 26 out of 28 EU countries have a very high Human Development Index, according to the UNDP. In 2012, the EU was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Through the Common Foreign and Security Policy, the EU has developed a role in external relations and defense. The Union maintains permanent diplomatic missions throughout the world and represents itself at the United Nations, the WTO, the G8, and the G20. Because of its global influence, the European Union has been described as a current or as a potential superpower. History. Preliminary. After World War II, European integration was seen as an antidote to the extreme nationalism which had devastated the continent. The 1948 Hague Congress was a pivotal moment in European federal history, as it led to the creation of the European Movement International and of the College of Europe, where Europe's future leaders would live and study together. 1952 saw the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community, which was declared to be a first step in the Federation of Europe. The supporters of the community included Alcide de Gasperi, Jean Monnet, Robert Schuman, and Paul-Henri Spaak. Treaty of Rome in 1957, Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands and West Germany signed the Treaty of Rome, which created the European Economic Community and established a customs union. They also signed another pact creating the European Atomic Energy Community for cooperation in developing nuclear energy. Both treaties came into force in 1958. The EEC and Euratom were created separately from ECSC, although they shared the same courts and the Common Assembly. The EEC was headed by Walter Hallstein and Euratom was headed by Louis Armand and then Etienne Hirsch. Euratom was to integrate sectors in nuclear energy while the EEC would develop a customs union among members. Through the 1960s, tensions began to show, with France seeking to limit supranational power. Nevertheless, in 1965 an agreement was reached, and on 1 July 1967 the merger treaty created a single set of institutions for the three communities, which were collectively referred to as the European Communities. Jean Rey presided over the first merged commission. In 1973, the communities enlarged to include Denmark, Ireland, and the United Kingdom. Norway had negotiated to join at the same time, but Norwegian voters rejected membership in a referendum. In 1979, the first direct, democratic elections to the European Parliament were held. Greece joined in 1981, Portugal and Spain in 1986. In 1985, the Schengen Agreement paved the way for the creation of open borders without passport controls between most member states and some non-member states. In 1986, the European flag began to be used by the community and the Single European Act was signed. In 1990, after the fall of the Eastern Bloc, the former East Germany became part of the community as part of a reunified Germany, with further enlargement planned to include the former communist states, as well as Cyprus and Malta. The Copenhagen criteria for candidate members to join the EU were agreed upon in June 1993. Maastricht Treaty. The European Union was formally established when the Maastricht Treaty, whose main architects were Helmut Kohl and François Mitterrand, came into force on 1 November 1993. The treaty also gave the name European Community to the EEC, even if it was referred as such before the treaty. In 1995, Austria, Finland, and Sweden joined the EU. In 2002, euro banknotes and coins replaced national currencies in 12 of the member states. Since then, the Eurozone has increased to encompass 19 countries. In 2004, the EU saw its biggest enlargement to date when Cyprus, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Hungary, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, Poland, Slovakia and Slovenia joined the Union. On 1 January 2007, Romania and Bulgaria became EU members. In the same year, Slovenia adopted the euro, followed in 2008 by Cyprus and Malta, by Slovakia in 2009, by Estonia in 2011, by Latvia in 2014 and by Lithuania in 2015. In June 2009, the European Parliament elections were held, leading to the second Barroso Commission, and by July, Iceland formally applied for EU membership, but has since suspended negotiations. On 1 December 2009, the Lisbon Treaty entered into force and reformed many aspects of the EU. In particular, it changed the legal structure of the European Union, merging the EU three-pillar system into a single legal entity provisioned with a legal personality, created a permanent president of the European Council, the first of which was Herman Van Rompuy, and strengthened the High Representative, Catherine Ashton. In 2012, the EU received the Nobel Peace Prize for having contributed to the advancement of peace and reconciliation, democracy, and human rights in Europe. On 1 July 2013, Croatia became the 28th EU member. Structural evolution. The following timeline illustrates the integration that has led to the formation of the present Union, in terms of structural development driven by international treaties. Geography. The EU's member states cover an area of 4,423,147 square kilometers. The EU's highest peak is Mont Blanc in the Grayan Alps, 4,810.45 meters above sea level. The lowest point in the EU is Lammerfjorden, Denmark, and Zoutpleispolder, Netherlands, at 7 meters below sea level. The landscape, climate, and economy of the EU are influenced by its coastline, which is 65,993 kilometers long, including the overseas territories of France, which are located outside the continent of Europe, but which are members of the Union. The EU experiences most types of climate from Arctic to tropical, rendering meteorological averages for the EU as a whole meaningless. The majority of the population lives in areas with a temperate maritime climate, a Mediterranean climate, or a warm summer continental or hemiboreal climate. The EU's population is highly urbanized, with some 75% of inhabitants living in urban areas. Cities are largely spread out across the EU, although with a large grouping in and around the Benelux. An increasing percentage of this is due to low-density urban sprawl which is extending into natural areas. In some cases, this urban growth has been due to the influx of EU funds into a region. Member states. The following 28 sovereign states constitute the Union. Through successive enlargements, the Union has grown from the 6 founding states, Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, to the current 28. Countries accede to the Union by becoming party to the founding treaties, thereby subjecting themselves to the privileges and obligations of EU membership. This entails a partial delegation of sovereignty to the institutions in return for representation within those institutions, a practice often referred to as pooling of sovereignty. To become a member, a country must meet the Copenhagen criteria, defined at the 1993 meeting of the European Council in Copenhagen. These require a stable democracy that respects human rights and the rule of law, a functioning market economy, and the acceptance of the obligations of membership, including EU law. Evaluation of a country's fulfillment of the criteria is the responsibility of the European Council. No member state has ever left the Union, although Greenland withdrew in 1985. The Lisbon Treaty now contains a clause providing for a member to leave the EU. There are 6 countries which are recognized as candidates for membership: Albania, Iceland, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Turkey. However, on 13 June 2013, Iceland's Foreign Minister, Gunnar Bragi Svensson, informed the European Commission that the newly elected government intended to put negotiations on hold. Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo are officially recognized as potential candidates, but have not submitted membership applications. Due to the lack of recognition by 5 of the 28 EU member states, the European Commission refers only to Kosovo *, with an asterisked footnote containing the text agreed to by the Belgrade-Pristina negotiations. This designation is without prejudice to positions on status, and is in line with UNSCR 1244 and the ICJ opinion on the Kosovo Declaration of Independence. 4 countries forming the European Free Trade Association have partly committed to the EU's economy and regulations: Iceland, Liechtenstein and Norway, which are a part of the single market through the European Economic Area, and Switzerland, which has similar ties through bilateral treaties. The relationships of the European microstates, Andorra, Monaco, San Marino, and the Vatican include the use of the euro and other areas of cooperation. Environment. In 1957, when the EU was founded, it had no environmental policy, bureaucracy or laws. Over the past 50 years, an increasingly dense network of legislation has been created, extending to all areas of environmental protection, including air pollution, water quality, waste management, nature conservation, and the control of chemicals, industrial hazards and biotechnology. According to the Institute for European Environmental Policy, environmental law comprises over 500 directives, regulations and decisions, making environmental policy a core area of European politics. Such developments may be surprising given the legal and institutional conditions of the late 1950s and 60s. Acting without any legislative authority, European policymakers originally increased the EU's capacity to act on environmental issues by defining it as a trade problem. Trade barriers and competitive distortions in the common market could emerge due to the different environmental standards in each member state. In subsequent years, the environment became a formal policy area, with its own policy actors, principles and procedures. The legal basis for EU environmental policy was established more explicitly with the introduction of the Single European Act in 1987. Initially, EU environmental policy focused on Europe. More recently, the EU has demonstrated leadership in global environmental governance, e.g., the role of the EU in securing the ratification and coming into force of the Kyoto Protocol despite opposition from the United States. This international dimension is reflected in the EU's sixth Environmental Action Programme, which recognizes that its objectives can only be achieved if key international agreements are actively supported and properly implemented both at EU level and worldwide. The Lisbon Treaty further strengthened the EU's global environmental leadership ambitions. EU law has played a significant role in improving habitat and species protection in Europe, as well as contributing to improvements in air and water quality and waste management. Mitigating climate change is one of the top priorities of EU environmental policy. In 2007, member states agreed that, in future, 20% of the energy used across the EU must be renewable, and carbon dioxide emissions have to be lower in 2020 by at least 20% compared to 1990 levels. Also in 2020, 10% of the fuel used by cars and trucks in EU 27 will have to be from renewable sources, such as biofuels. The EU has adopted an emissions trading system to incorporate carbon emissions into the economy. The European Green Capital is an annual award given to cities that focuses on the environment, energy efficiency and quality of life in urban areas to create smart city.